Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a genuinely fascinating and, frankly, pretty controversial spiritual revelation dated January 17th, 2018. Specifically, we're unpacking Chapter 6, which is all about faith, miracles, and magic. This is a bold text that attempts to radically shift our paradigm, challenging everything from our traditional understanding of the biblical Moses to the very foundations of our modern educational system. It's going to ask us to really reconsider what we think we know about history, leadership, and the unseen forces of the universe.
Right, let's jump right in. The source material we're looking at frames itself as a direct spiritual revelation from an ancient entity known as Ophearis, a figure tied to the very roots of Greek and Egyptian spirituality. And this text, it is not pulling any punches. It challenges two massive pillars of global thought all at once: conventional religious history and our modern reliance on scientific materialism. The main thing we're exploring today is how humanity supposedly lost its connection to miraculous power and what this ancient perspective says we need to do to get it back.
To wrap our heads around this paradigm shift, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the virtues of a true leader, take a look at Moses as a reluctant prophet, discuss ultimate divine authority, unpack the flaws of modern education, and finally, talk about reclaiming miracles and magic.
All right, Section 1, Virtues of a True Leader, the baseline requirements. We're starting with what this text defines as the absolute must-haves for anyone holding true power.
So according to the text, if you're a leader acting as God's representative on earth, you can't just be, a great speaker or a solid manager. You absolutely must have high spiritual abilities, like a literal functional connection to the divine. But, and this is a big but, power alone doesn't cut it. That spiritual capacity has to be grounded in a profound sense of justice and deeply rooted morality. The text insists that without those moral anchors, spiritual power just gets corrupted. A true leader uses their connection to the unseen world to actually enact justice in the physical world.
Moving right along to Section 2, Moses, a reluctant prophet. Let's see how these virtues reframe one of history's most famous leaders.
Now this is where things get really interesting. We all know the traditional, almost cinematic version of Moses, right? The bold, staff-wielding hero confidently staring down Pharaoh. Well, Ophearis' revelation paints a wildly different picture. In this text, the biblical Moses is described as a highly passive, quote-unquote, weak-willed man. Sure, he had magical capabilities, but he definitely wasn't a natural self-starter. In fact, he wouldn't make a monumental move unless he was heavily pushed by an outside force.
Which brings us to Section 3. The ultimate divine authority. This explains why God had to show up in such a dramatic way. Here's the crux of it.
Because Moses was so incredibly hesitant, a gentle nudge just wasn't going to work. The text claims God had to reveal himself with absolute, unquestionable authority. By declaring, "I am that I am," which is a statement of ultimate existence, God wasn't just saying hello. He was applying the immense psychological and spiritual pressure required to literally force a passive man to stand up to an empire. Basically, the sheer grandiosity of that revelation was directly matched to Moses' internal resistance.
So this ancient example sets up a massive shift in how we understand our interaction with the spiritual realm. It implies that back in the day, even chosen leaders were so flawed, or just so reluctant, that they literally needed mind-bending miracles, burning bushes, parted seas, the booming voice of the Creator, just to find the courage to act. The magic wasn't a party trick for them. It was a functional necessity to push human history forward.
And that brilliantly illustrates the core tension of today's explainer. Think about it. If this undeniable, miraculous magic was absolutely vital for shaping history, what on earth happened to it? Why is our modern world seemingly so completely devoid of these miracles?
To answer that, let's look at Section 4, the flaws of modern education. The text takes a sharp pivot right into the present day. According to the source, the real culprit here is our modern education system. Specifically, it points the finger at our heavy overemphasis on something called logical positivism. Now, in simple terms, this is an educational philosophy that strictly demands logical, physical, material proof for everything. If you can't measure it or prove it with an equation, it's just dismissed as false. And the revelation argues that this rigid framework completely blinds us, systematically shutting down our capacity to even perceive miracles.
The text actually claims this isn't just an accident. Well, actually, it's a systemic flaw. From elementary school all the way to elite universities, the curriculum is entirely obsessed with minor logical details and rigid proofs. This stubborn focus actively suppresses our innate spiritual abilities. The source goes as far as saying that an education based entirely on logic weakens magical power to the extreme, creating what it dramatically calls a mad world, where the most important invisible truths are just completely ignored.
So is there a fix? Section 5. Reclaiming Miracles and Magic. The text actually lays out a path forward. The proposed solution is a fundamental three-step paradigm shift. Step 1. Modern people have to consciously reject strict materialism and purely logical positivism. You don't have to throw out reason entirely, but you got to accept that reason alone doesn't explain the whole universe. Step 2. Actively restore the lost power of belief. It's faith in the unseen that bridges the gap between the physical and the spiritual. And step 3, by rebuilding that connection, the text claims we can literally unlock and manifest miraculous, magical abilities in our own lives once again.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought inspired by Ophiels's message. In our relentless pursuit of hard data, metrics, and logical proof for literally everything, have we educated the magic right out of our reality? Have we built a world so completely obsessed with the material that we've locked ourselves out of the miraculous? It's a really profound question about the nature of belief, and it entirely shifts how we view the invisible world around us. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive today.